Welcome to the mysterious life of Francis Bacon, and boy is this going to be mysterious. You want to talk about a mystery. Francis Bacon, I came across wanting to research him while I was in the middle of another mystery of Sarah Winchester, and that's for another video. Who was Francis Bacon? Well, he was born in 1561 and he died in 1626. The story gets very interesting. In 1558, Elizabeth Tudor was the Protestant queen under a fierce battle with the Catholics. She found a note on her pillow threatening her life. She adopted a strategy. She would be the Virgin Queen. Married only to the state, they fell for it. Secretly, her lover was Robert Dudley. And conveniently, she located his bedchamber so that it adjoined hers. December 1560. Few people had discovered that the queen was pregnant. She secretly exchanged vows with Dudley. Then she had the baby and took it to a trusted, highly trusted couple to raise. She named the baby Mr. Francis Bacon, telling the couple that this baby would be highly gifted. By the age of 12, he was fluent in Greek, Latin, Italian, French, Spanish. The queen was responsible for all of his education, and she wanted him to have the best. She often referred to him as Baby Solomon. Here's the queen looking rather pregnant. Of course, there were no photographs back then. Here's another portrait of her. This is a young Francis Bacon, and he does look like quite the scholar, doesn't he? Back in this age, if you were a poet, that was considered the work of the devil, and so was acting. And if you angered the queen or royalty or anyone that was affluent, you could have a punishment of death. So a lot of poets wrote under pen names, under other names. And Francis Bacon was a gifted writer. He was gifted in poetry. So he had to find a name to write under. And he did. And it was Shakespeare. So Francis Bacon created Shakespeare. And through Shakespeare, he was mirroring his love of this goddess Pallas Athena, and she's often seen shaking her spear at ignorance. So that symbol you're going to see in quite a few paintings, and now you know what that is. We're skimming through his life. There's quite a bit more in here, but we're just skimming over this so this doesn't get too long. But at the Queen's death, the most powerful man in England was Robert Cecil. But the nearest blood relative to Francis was King James, son of Elizabeth's late cousin Mary Stuart. So King James promoted Bacon to a position of membership in the King's Council. The Puritan leader John Rinaldo needed an English translation of the Bible. Guess who did it? Yep, Francis Bacon. He told King James he wanted his own version of this Bible. And in 1609, it was handed over to him. 1611, it was published. And if you want a little bit of proof of this, I will tell you that you can go to Psalms chapter 46. The 46th word is from the first word is shake, and the 46th word from the end going backwards is spear. He literally has his name in the Bible. So, the late Charlton Heston stated, no other literary work reads more like Shakespeare than the King James Version of the Bible. I mean, they were starting to figure this out. Francis Bacon understood that the only way to reveal all that nature conceals is through the transcendental science of numbers, and he was a master mathematician and numerologist. I also want to tell you something interesting. John Dee was the astrologer to the Queen, and of course he couldn't put anything in writing to the Queen with his real name on it, so he had a code name, and it was 007. I just thought you might find that very interesting. So Francis Bacon was a genius, and he also had his hands in the Freemasonry. He was influential to our early presidents, George Washington. This is an amazing search that you can go on with when you start to research Francis Bacon and how much influence our country has based on Francis Bacon. And in the Library of Congress, his statue is there. So don't you find it interesting that his name isn't all over history? I find it very interesting. At the end of his days, he needed to find a resting place for his most secret work. And there is rumor that it was at Oak Island. That's one of the places. So this is in Nova Scotia. No wonder they're digging up Oak Island, right? They're looking for treasure. Do you think it's possible they're looking for the works of Francis Bacon, his secret works? It certainly makes one wonder. So it also puzzled the great thinkers of our time of why, when Shakespeare, who was Francis Bacon, so Shakespeare passed away, or the pen name passed away in 1616, but Bacon continued to write for up to 10 years after the Shakespeare was allegedly dead. So now you know that William Shakespeare was actually Francis Bacon. And so you can see what a great writer that he was. So there's other proof in the Bible that Bacon put in there. Now he of course didn't take any credit for the Bible. He gave that all to King James. So that's why it's the King James version of the Bible. But I will tell you that the word swine, the pig or the swine, is in Bacon's family coat of arms. So there's a lot of references to swine in there in the Bible. But what I'm going to do is actually pull some tarot cards and ask a few questions about this. In the research and how much influence Francis Bacon had in not only the Freemasonry, but in our English language, and also influencing the presidents, the early presidents of this country, I wanted to ask, and I'm going to ask my Universal Weight, the Sirius deck here. I'm going to ask if Francis Bacon, if he actually was responsible for most of the culture, or the early culture that we have in this country. Was Francis Bacon one of the leading influencers of the United States of America? And I'm going to see what I pull. Look at this, Judgment. Look at this. This is the Judgment card. So he was one of a few. He was one of the few. So he wasn't the only one, but he was one of the few. And also, the Judgment means that he did have a major, that's a major arcana card, he did have a major influence on our country here. And then I want to ask did he developed a mathematics that he says that, according to Sarah Winchester, this mathematical code that he knew about, which I think they're trying to find, defies the laws of this realm that we're in now. So I want to ask if the mathematical codes that Francis Bacon came up with defies the laws of our third dimensional reality here. That's just a question look at this. So this is our reality because this is a pentacles. This is a pentacle. But you know what's interesting on here is the snail. So we're at a snail's progress. We are at a snail's progress to what he figured out. And of course the falcon, look at the falcon. It has a hood on the head. There's a cover over its head. So it's not understood here. It's not understood. And what is the greatest thing that Francis Bacon wants us to know right now? What is the greatest thing he wants us to know right now? Look at this. Shut your mouth, right? Don't expose too much. Like, keep your mouth shut. And he's in spirit, and he's still having an influence in spirit. And this is the infinity symbol. Energy can never be destroyed or created and destroyed. And then also it's literally keep your mouth shut. If you figure something out on this higher dimensional math, keep your mouth shut, because she's closing the mouth of the lion. That's very interesting. So I think that we have a great deal to learn about what our real history is. And when you start studying the life of Francis Bacon, you have to dig pretty deeply to uncover some of the things about his life and his influence on not only our language, but some of the beliefs that we have, and also the King James version of the Bible. If people are looking at that, just so you know that most of the words in there have a very numeric code, because he always was interested in this numerology code. And so most of that Bible is coded with numerology. And remember, he wanted his own version of that. So that brings up some very controversial material from people who read the Bible. So you'll have to I will leave you to do your own research on that, whether you think that Francis Bacon wrote or heavily influenced the King James Bible. I find it very fascinating, and I love chasing mysteries like this. I think we'll probably dive deeper into Francis Bacon's life in later episodes.